So hello, everybody. My name is Royal O'Brien. I am the General Manager of Digital Media and Games over at the Linux Foundation. I'm also the Executive Director of the Open Metaverse Foundation and the Open 3D Foundation. So I get to have lots of fun talking about these topics from a lot of different groups in a lot of different areas. My background, I've been an engineer for about 40 years. I'm in the game industry for over 20 years. I've built many of the different distribution asset systems, for companies like EA and others like that. So kind of been involved in this area and built quite a few companies in my past as well. So I kind of cross between technology and business. So I'm always open to talk about any of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of open source in metaverse development. And I want to kind of frame some of this out. So let's begin kind of with the metaverse itself. Is it this plush world, cyber world of 3D fantasy, or maybe it's a travel place or place for somebody to learn for any age. Maybe it's an engineer controlling a plant in an industrial type of application, or maybe a staff meeting where people are kind of collaborating for design. We don't really know. We're still dreaming, but we know that all of the different facets have an impact on what assets will look like, what people will need, what are the constraints, what are the environments, what are we looking at in scale. And it's really important to take that into account when we're thinking about these things. And so let's kind of put this under context, because you always get these different terminology and different answers. And so, for one, what do you see in this picture, right? You have a person kind of look like they're in a portal, and maybe this is kind of what it looks like when you're transitioning from world to world in the metaverse. There's a lot of content going on here. So how do all of these people see you? How do you load all of these people? How do you load all of the different positions on their avatar, all of the assets and the environments? Can you overhear them? Can you interact with them? How often do they move? What is their update schedule? Are they real, or is it AI? And can you interact with some of these AI? Is it kind of automated? And did you see an ad or somehow transact, whether you intended to or not intended to? And how does that kind of proliferate when we talk about user-generated content and the assets that go along with that? So there's this thing where you have to realize the magnitude of scalability is absurd when it comes to this. And how will you present? I mean, think about it. There's kind of that three faces. And the first face you'll show to the world, the second one you show to your close friends and your family, and the third one you never really show to anyone, but it's the truest reflection of who you are. Because you go on LinkedIn, you have your professional view, you play your games, you have a different perspective. And in Metaverse, you're going to have those same things, and each one is going to generate a separate content pool. So when we ask somebody, what is a user? It could be any of these different personas and the content and assets and things that go along with it at the same time. It's not like you're going to be switching from them, because people will see you in different contexts. And who sees what persona is going to be an important part of it. So when you change outfits, how does that going to get proliferated? How will people pick up that content? What are the asset models behind it? So a lot of those things are really important. And how will that translate across worlds? Because remember, we're talking about immersion. So when I start seeing things, and I'm talking about second and third generation, I'm looking across a portal into another server environment, I'm getting slow scale replication. Some of those assets need to be translated because maybe the fidelity is a little different. Maybe the interim version of it is different. So we start thinking about, what are the LODs? What are the artistic characteristics of that identified object in these different environments? Now, all of a sudden, assets went from this simple thing that we thought about to all the different iterations of it and how that's going to actually be done. And that's the reason why it's really important for us to have this kind of interoperability and communication to get that done, because without it, you're never going to get servers that were never intended, or clients that were never intended to talk to each other, to be able to talk to each other in an orderly manner. And that's the reason, of course, why everyone is here, which is to help build these kind of standards so that people can write the software to actually make it happen. So at least that can give you an idea of the context of what I'm talking about here. So why can't we get a straight answer? And it's really simple. Different people, different answers. So I'll post this statement out. The metaverse it's just a sample. The metaverse can be envisioned as a mixed reality experience where real and or virtual objects and worlds are presented to a user on a system containing of a visual display and or audio system that enable positionally and spatially accurate experience. Now, if I tell that to somebody who is into digital assets, they're going to say, I need to know about FBX, I need to know about textures, I need to know mesh, I need to know, all these different things so I can show you what these objects are going to look like on the visual display. That's a correct answer. But here's the problem. If I say the same thing to somebody who's into networking, they're going to say, yeah, well, that's because I need the asset identifier and I need that to go into a Delta packet so I know what the coordinate space is going to be so I can actually transmit that to 1,000 other people and have them understand what's going on within these objects that are supposed to be assets. And that's a correct answer too. Same thing applies for virtual worlds and simulations. They're kind of looking at it, well, do they own this thing? Can they replicate it? How am I going to replicate that out? They're not thinking of the actual mesh and texture, or maybe they're thinking of the collision models that are behind it because they want to enforce physics. So you have different answers coming from different people, and it can confuse others that are not within that discipline. Same thing again with transactions. And so, kind of talking about open interoperability, source and standards, open is essential for creativity. You got to remember one thing here is that, Matt, some of you may remember that at one point we had this thing where they were trying to create fast lanes on the internet, where if you were a certain organization, you could have faster internet service than others. And what would have the result have been would have been a much less creative internet, a bunch of portals. So, new things like ChatGPT that came out wouldn't be so great because it would take so long because it wouldn't have access to a fast lane, or it would need to be funded to get a fast lane. So think about some of these decisions that we're talking about here are going to have a big impact. And what if you had to pay a subscription for your browser? Kind of take that for granted that you get Chrome and Edge and all these things for free. So there are a lot of elements that come into play. And that's because it's much easier to herd people by the least resistance or best of show. We're talking about digital assets. I can't send down a bunch of 2K, 4K images. I can't send a bunch of high poly things down because if the requirement is a terabyte or, a gig of data that I need to transmit before you even can get into a world, that's a problem. And so the one who has the least resistance and get me an experience fastest with the best of show will be the winner. That's got to be a focus because content is king. And we already know people can't even watch a web page for more than a few seconds before they go somewhere else. And the other part is that you need to level the playing field for large and small companies and for individuals. That means that these same things, making sure that they're built in the open and that there is no constraints that prevent them from being able to have that. We don't want to create advantages for others that don't have big fiscal or deep pockets to be creative. We want challenge to happen. It's how we grow. If you look at the internet and the metaverse have a lot of parallels, and they're both a playground where people really spend a lot of time. They learn, they share, they contribute, they do all of these things together. And there's a good reason for that, because we love to build, show, and trade. Those are the things that we do the most on the internet. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, that's a lot of what happens. You're either consuming or producing. So consider that when we're talking about all these assets and the volume. I'm not talking about the fixed world stuff. I'm talking about user generated content. I'm talking about things that come out of everywhere, because when we're in the metaverse, the reality of this is that the ones who can change content, who can update content, who can build continually engaging experiences, they're going to have a competitive advantage and to attract the most people. And that means content. So I want to talk a little about the Open Metaverse Foundation. The Open Metaverse Foundation is of course, a nonprofit that falls underneath the Linux Foundation. And the mission of it is to create open software and standards that enable portability and interoperability for an open, global, scalable world, which supports interactive and immersive experiences for the benefit of any individual or industry. We're not building the metaverse. That is not the purpose. The purpose is actually to help create the building blocks to enable developers to build an interoperable metaverse. So in other words, when you look at all the software, you're going, well, that's kind of vague. Well, how many people here write their own JPEG library or their own MPEG library or write their own HTML parser from scratch? Right. You use open source because you're using the building blocks to enable you to be able to do these things. That's what we're focused on. We're focused on all of the small building blocks that can be brought together to be able to build an interoperable metaverse. And so it's focused on many different areas. We have areas between users, transactions, digital assets, virtual worlds and simulations, artificial intelligence, networking, security and privacy, and legal policy. When I say legal and policy, this is not where you get legal advice. The problem is that with all the different groups of attorneys that I speak with, they don't actually have a good source of truth because there's so much information, some good, some bad, some swayed, some with an agenda, and it's very problematic. They're looking for a place where they can come into an open community, ask questions, find information, and give opinions, not legal opinions, just opinions in general. This is really important because that's how they'll be able to set some of the different legal policies based on the information they get from communities. So the focus of the Open Metaverse Foundation, for one, is to help create scenarios. In other words, real-world use cases that can be solved independently by each foundational interest group. And if you're curious, foundational interest group, that's all of these. There are 8 foundational interest groups that we started with as focal areas. Then also develop the actual source code. So create some portable and demonstrable code with structures to meet the needs of the use case and specifications. We have a project right now that's actually started up, the DACD and DICON project, which is about a containerized format that can be stored and replicated on CDNs that are also compatible with being able to use with blockchain identifiers and non-blockchain in a large-scale container with multi-range replication, which you're going to need in scale, especially when you're talking about peer-to-peer, point-to-point, or CDN and edge cache with seeding. Then also building the specifications. In other words, the disciplines kind of drive that design and challenge the specifications of software that are being done to meet the scenario needs, and to kind of bring these together as to what makes the most sense, and then be able to work with different standards groups to actually ratify these specifications and bring them into interoperable standards. So that's kind of the idea of what we're focused on. And so how do we work? Well, for one, we build and publish everything in the open. In the early, we've kind of built a plan deck, we built a plan document, we built a phase 1 doc, which gave us kind of a framework as to what we think some of these things may look like. We had a lot of editing, and it's continually changing of what we're doing. But the idea is to produce code and documentation that we can iterate to achieve just limited goals that we can iterate on year after year. Here's the thing, we can all talk theory, but until something gets produced, you really have nothing to iterate on. And we really do need tools and things to iterate on. And so that's why we're focused a lot on building code and building the different pieces behind that, because we can't discover what we love and what we hate until we actually try to do it. And so that's kind of another element to it. And the other part is that we believe that there's no single organization or foundation should be the only voice. So we look to embrace communication and work with other groups. That's why we do everything in the open. We tell everybody, everything we produce, come and take it, come and use it, everything we have. We don't want to be the single voice of everything. We want to work with others to actually get this done and to accomplish and to grow with everyone. So we'll continue to operate in that manner. It may seem a bit odd, but that is kind of the epitome of open source and open environments, is being able to share with everyone so that we grow as a whole, which is one of our most powerful elements. And so one of the things I want to kind of show when I was talking about these different areas is I'm going to switch over my screen real quick. So this is the actual website. When you go to the Metaverse Foundation, you'll find that there's a lot of information here, all the foundational interest groups. When you click inside of these, there's a learn more. And when you hit them, you can learn about what the foundational interest group is for. Why does it exist? And so you'll have a lot of the summary up here. There are a handful of videos. We did about 20 some videos, I believe, in the different areas with companies like Accenture and AWS and other organizations that were talking in these areas about metaverse and metaverse related things, and also open 3D. So you can take a look and listen and pull up a lot of information. There's also birds of a feather where people basically just argued and went at it. And at the bottom, it gives you a better idea of a list of topics that are the things that we're focusing on, that we're trying to actually help solve. And so this all kind of lays out and gives us a framework to operate with. At the same time, we also operate a Discord. Within the Discord itself, you'll find out that there's a lot of information. We're almost up to 1,000. We're 846 of what we're showing in here. And then we're basically growing with all the different areas. You'll find that you've got quite a few different conversations, people talking about experiments and things that they're actually doing, hardware, software, how they're doing those. And then at the same time, you have all the different chat areas. So the specific parts that I was just talking about these are where you'll find the groups and information and contextual pieces. So there's a schedule of when the meetings are, when we get together, and that's actually on a calendar. You can join list.openmv.org and you can see when they're having them that are in that. So there's a calendar here. And then on top of that, you also have in each one of these, we've been building a top level document. So the top level document is one that we keep iterating on. And it kind of just a narrative 30,000 foot view as to statements about the metaverse of what we think it may be. And then we're building a database that says, here are some of the feature synopsis and elements and links as to where these are pieces that we need to look at. You know, we need to solve, how do we get dynamically accessible mesh LODs? And we talk about, here's the areas of where we can do this. So these are areas you can also pull information from. If you don't like Discord, you can join the Slack. It's just as easily. We have a live bot that actually replicates Discord and Slack in real time. So if you type something in one, you'll see it in the other. And the bot actually scrapes the conversations into the mailing lists. So you don't necessarily have to be in the mailing list to see what's going on. You can go into here and you can see these are some of the scraped conversations for that day. So this kind of gives you a general idea of, you know, what the environment looks like and what we're doing. And then, of course, if you'd like to get involved, the website is here. There's the Discord and Slack links. If you'd like to get involved, more than welcome to participate in the meetings. They're all held in the open. Anyone can access them at any time. We have different open source projects that we're actually building right now. There's an OpenMV in GitHub. You'll find a tremendous amount of information there of where it is and places that you can contribute to. So when I'm talking about, you know, in GitHub, flipping back over to here, you can go to GitHub, Open Metaverse, and you'll find out that there is everything here. The interest areas, meeting links, mailing list, features, databases, all of this is in GitHub, where you can get in here and you can see what each one of them are doing. You can actually go into some of the different meeting areas. You'll find that the meetings charters, there's recordings, there's summaries of everything in here. And then if you're interested in getting involved in some of the projects, you can also go to the OpenMV sandbox, where we have our initial projects that we do. And you'll see there's things like DACD, which is in Rust, which is an early standardization for package containerized formats that has been getting built by the community. This one definitely doesn't have the, oh, I need to go to DICON. So this can be an idea of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to work with others, and build some of these pieces for the community to have, use, and to grow with. So, oh, somebody I guess had a question. Oh, they posted it over there. And that's pretty much everything there. Now, there is one other thing that I want to bring up, which is, if you remember the question, imagine if you had to pay for your browser. Consider that we're going to be looking at 3D worlds and environments, and what will they be? There's also another open source engine that's out there, the Open 3D engine. It is a fully featured high fidelity 3D engine for building games and simulations. It's Apache 2 at MIT. It's completely open source. It supports PC, mobile, Linux, and there's a full OpenXR for that supports Meta, Oculus, the Quest. So you can build things for that. The next stable release is next month, the beginning of it. It is a complete end-to-end tool chain. You can go to GitHub/O3DE and go get the millions of lines that are there. There's a Discord community behind it. We have a mobile device working group for partners that are actually working on these things, that are focused on doing that, which provides a greater opportunity for OpenXR. It is modular by design, which means if there's any part of the code that you like, take it, do whatever you wish with it. It is built modular. So it's not where, if you like the renderer, you have to take the engine. It's a library. You literally can shut it off and take it with you. So something else to look at, we're talking about open source. The full source code's here, all of the elements, the website, the Discord, and the calendar of events, how you can get involved also with the Open 3D engine. And that's really everything. I'll have kind of a longer version I'll probably talk about later tonight, but this is kind of the gist of it.